the announcement, and my immediate reaction. My girlfriend informed me that her ex was moving into our apartment, not asking, but stating it as a fact. I had roughly 12 hours before they arrived with a moving truck, so I scrambled to make a few calls. Let me set the scene properly. It was Tuesday morning and I was getting ready for work when Vanessa walked out of the bedroom, holding her phone, and said we needed to talk. I assumed it would be something small, maybe planning a date or dealing with some minor problem. Instead, she told me Derek, her ex, was having a hard time. He'd lost his job, been evicted, and had nowhere to go. She wanted him to stay with us for a couple of weeks until he got back on his feet. In our one-bedroom apartment, the apartment I pay for. I set my coffee down and asked if she was serious. She was completely serious. According to her, Derek had always been there for her. He was practically family, and we had space. I looked around our one bedroom and asked where he would sleep. She said he could crash on the couch for a few weeks. I asked why his family couldn't help. She said his family was complicated and that he needed friends. I asked why she hadn't discussed this with me beforehand. She replied that she was telling me now because Derek was already on his way, driving from 2 states over, expected to arrive around 8 that night. I stood there processing the fact that my girlfriend had just decided her ex would move in with us that very night, and only then informed me. I asked how long they had dated. She said 3 years, ending 4 years ago, and that they'd stayed friends. I asked whether I had any say in the matter. She said the decision was already made. I could be supportive, or I wasn't the man she thought I was. I looked at her and said, okay, if that's how it was going to be. She seemed surprised and said, really? I replied, sure. The more the merrier, I said, and she smiled, kissed me, and told me she knew I'd understand, that it would only be temporary, and Derek would be gone before I knew it. She left for work, and I sat there thinking about how she'd unilaterally decided this and expected me to accept it. The lease is in my name. Vanessa has lived here about 3 weeks, arrived with a couple of suitcases and a duffel, keeps a toothbrush and some clothes, but her own lease at her other place doesn't end until next month. Mail still goes there. Her driver's license has that address. We had talked about her moving in officially when her lease ended next month. For now, she was an extended guest, not a tenant. The plan, move out fast. I made a call. My friend Frank runs a moving company. I explained the situation and asked if a crew could come today. He laughed, said he'd make it happen, and I gave him my address and asked to meet him at 3:00. Then I phoned the leasing office and said I needed to break my lease for a personal emergency and would need to move quickly. The woman on the phone pulled up my file. I'd been a good tenant for 2 years, always paid on time. Breaking the lease would require 60 days' notice or a penalty equal to 2 months' rent, about $4,000. I told her I would pay it and asked when I could be out. She said if I could clear out by the end of the week, she'd process the termination on Friday morning. Bring the keys then. I said, deal. I called my brother to explain. He was incredulous. She did what? I told him again, and said I was moving out, not letting her ex move in. He invited me to stay at his place and offered the guest room. He said he'd take the day off to help me move. I called my boss, asked for Wednesday and Thursday off for a personal emergency. He agreed without fuss. I went to work, kept my focus, left at noon, stopped by a storage facility, rented a 10x10 unit month to month, paid the first month and got the keys. I had a few hours to work with. Vanessa was at work until 6 Vox. Inventory, documentation, and the first load. At home, I sorted my things. I listed the furniture, electronics, and other possessions that were mine. Couch, bed frame and mattress, dresser, TV, kitchen table, chairs, and so on. Vanessa had moved in light, 3 weeks earlier with 2 rolling suitcases and a duffel. She had clothes in the closet, toiletries in the bathroom, some snacks and a few books. But the substantial furniture was mine, purchased before we dated. I photographed everything and documented what was mine and what was hers. I wanted a clear record. I also grabbed the spare key I had given Vanessa that she left on the kitchen counter and pocketed it. Both keys would be returned to the leasing office when I signed the lease termination. At 3, Frank arrived with a 2-man crew and a big truck. I showed them the items to move. The major pieces went first: couch, bed, mattress, dresser, TV stand, dining table, and chairs. They loaded carefully and transported everything to the storage unit across town. I told them to take their time and do it right. They worked until about 6 o'clock. When they left, the apartment looked less furnished, though my smaller personal items remained. Clothes, dishes, books, laptop, the things I'd pack myself the next day. I thanked Frank. He wished me luck, telling me I was doing the right thing. I packed a laptop and important documents in my car and left. I arrived at my brother's house around 7. He'd just gotten home from work. We talked and he asked how the first phase went. I told him furniture was in storage and I'd return the next day for the rest. The fallout, calls, Derek, and confrontation. My phone began ringing at 8:15. Vanessa called. I let it ring. Then texts arrived. Where are you? Why does the apartment look weird? Where's the couch? Call me. What's going on? More calls came in and I didn't answer. At 8:30, a different number rang. I picked up and a man asked if I was Vanessa's boyfriend. Who is this? I replied. Derek, he said. He was at the apartment building and told me Vanessa was freaking out. All the furniture's gone. What's happening? I told him plainly the furniture was mine and I'd moved it out. He was quiet, then said Vanessa had told him this was arranged, that I was okay with him staying there. I told him she'd told him wrong. I found out that morning and wasn't asked. He said he'd driven 8 hours with his belongings and sounded dismayed. I suggested he talk to Vanessa about where he was actually staying, then we hung up. Vanessa called immediately and I answered. She was sobbing, saying the apartment was empty, and Derek had arrived with a U-Haul full of stuff that had nowhere to go. I stayed calm and told her I'd moved my furniture because it was mine and I could. She pleaded, asking where Derek would sleep. I replied that she still had her studio, and her lease hadn't ended. She said her place was tiny, a studio. I said, then you'll be cozy. She cried that this wasn't funny and begged me to help Derek. I said help him at your place, not mine. She cried harder, saying I was ruining everything. I told her she made a decision without me and I had made one without her. Now we were even. She asked where I was. I told her that wasn't her concern. She asked if we were breaking up. I said I didn't know and that I wasn't going to live with her ex, non-negotiable, and hung up. My brother watched all this and said, that was cold. I explained the cause and he said that knowing it that way made him sleep much better that night. Clearing out entirely and formal lease termination Wednesday morning, I returned to the apartment. Vanessa wasn't there. Likely she'd stayed at her studio with Derek overnight. I packed all remaining personal items, clothes, dishes, electronics, books. My brother arrived at 9, and we loaded our vehicles and made 2 trips to the storage unit. By early afternoon, the apartment contained only Vanessa's 2 suitcases in the closet, toiletries in the bathroom, a few books and decorations she'd brought. Nothing of mine. I photographed the mostly empty apartment and messaged Vanessa. Your things are still in the apartment. Mine are gone. You have until Friday to figure out what you're doing. She didn't respond. Thursday, my brother and I organized the storage unit and arranged everything properly. The phone was quiet that evening. No calls from Vanessa. I assumed she was dealing with her situation. On Friday morning at 9, I went to the leasing office. The property manager had the paperwork ready. I signed the lease termination and paid the $4,000 penalty with a cashier's check I'd prepared. She gave me a receipt and I handed over both sets of keys. She said she was sorry to see me go and asked if everything was okay. I said it was a personal situation and needed a change. She scheduled a walkthrough for Monday and noted that Vanessa's belongings remained in the unit. I pointed out Vanessa wasn't on the lease and had been staying as my guest. Her own apartment was across town. The manager acknowledged this and said Vanessa would have to follow protocol to remove her things. With that, I left. An official and clean break, adjustment, a meeting, and decisions. I spent the weekend at my brother's guest room, which was temporary but comfortable. I started looking at apartments online and found a few options. Monday afternoon, Vanessa called for the first time since Tuesday night. She sounded drained and told me the leasing office had called. The lease had been terminated and she needed to remove her belongings by Wednesday, or they'd be considered abandoned. I replied, "Okay." She asked if I had really moved out. I said yes. She asked where that left us and whether we could talk in person. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop near her studio the next afternoon. Tuesday, I met her there. She looked exhausted, likely from sleeping on the studio floor with Derek. She apologized and admitted she'd handled everything poorly. Derek had rented a storage unit for his things and was sleeping on her studio floor. Her landlord had begun asking questions, and she feared eviction for an unauthorized occupant. She asked if we could fix things and come back together. I pointed out I didn't have a place to return to. I'd broken the lease. She was stunned. "You actually broke it?" I nodded. She asked where I was living, and I told her with my brother. She asked why I had gone to such lengths, and I explained it wasn't about Derek, it was about the way she'd operated, making major decisions without consulting me and expecting compliance. She said she understood and had learned her lesson. I said perhaps, but I wasn't interested in being a test case to see if she truly changed or was only saying the right things. She cried and said she didn't want to lose me. I told her she should have thought of that before. She asked whether there was any chance for reconciliation, and I said I didn't know. Right now I needed to focus on myself and avoid drama. I told her to sort out Derek and get her stuff removed. I was handling my side. She agreed, left, and I went back to my brother. He asked how it went, and I told him I didn't feel guilty. She'd made a choice, and so had I. Aftermath, their fallout and my fresh start. Over the next 2 weeks, I learned through coworkers and mutual contacts that Derek had found a room to rent and moved out of Vanessa's studio. Vanessa seemed relieved. I didn't reach out. 3 weeks after the incident, I found a new one-bedroom in a different neighborhood. Better, actually. I signed the lease in my name, and my brother helped me move everything out of storage that weekend. Setting up my new place felt good. It was my space with my rules, and I didn't tell Vanessa or mutual friends where I'd moved. Word somehow got out. A mutual friend, Sarah, called me and said Vanessa had asked about me. She'd seen my car at a new apartment complex and mentioned it. Vanessa texted, congratulated me, and asked if we could meet. I decided to meet her again at the same coffee shop. This time, she looked less stressed and said Derek was gone and had his own place. She called the whole episode a disaster, said she'd learned a lot, and asked for another chance. I asked what she'd learned. She listed the usual. Relationships require discussion, communication, and consideration. Those were good words, she said, and asked if we could try again. I declined. She was hurt and asked why. I said that, while learning is helpful, I didn't want to be the person who had to test whether she truly changed or was only saying what I wanted to hear. She asked if there might be a chance later. I said I didn't know, but for now I was happy being single, in my own place, and free of drama. She left and I went on with building my life. A month passed, then another. I settled into my new apartment, focused on work, started going to the gym again, and picked up cooking rather than ordering in. Life became calm and mine. 2 months after the breakup, I ran into Derek at a grocery store checkout. We exchanged a nod and moved on. Nothing to say. 3 months later, Vanessa's mother called, curious about what happened. I told her my version. Vanessa told me Tuesday morning that her ex was moving into my apartment, already on his way that night, and I chose to move out, broke my lease, took my furniture, and started over. Her mother said that made sense and understood my reaction. She asked whether Vanessa had grown from the experience. I said I didn't know and that it was no longer my concern. She apologized for how things turned out. We ended the call, and I continued rebuilding. At a later gathering, I ran into mutual friends who'd heard only Vanessa's side, that I'd left abruptly. I gave them the short version of events. They were surprised, and a few apologized for having believed only one perspective. I told them I was doing better than ever. They asked if I'd ever get back together. I said no, and explained that a unilateral decision about my home was a fundamental disrespect, not something repaired by an apology. Over time, things improved. A job promotion, the new apartment felt like home, some casual dating, and a clear idea of what I wanted. A partner who communicates, discusses major decisions, and respects boundaries. That seemed basic, yet crucial. 6 months out, I was doing well. Vanessa moved to another city for a new job and a fresh start, which I hoped would teach her something useful for future relationships. My dad, finally hearing about the breakup months later, told me he was proud I set boundaries and removed myself instead of letting someone disrespect me. That meant a lot. He isn't one to share emotions freely. My brother and I reflected on whether I'd done the right thing. He agreed I had because allowing that one decision would have set a precedent. Next time it might be money spent, children, or bigger commitments decided unilaterally. Derek was the symptom. The real issue was how she made choices and expected compliance. I'd noticed and acted. He nodded and said, I'd done the right thing. I knew it too. Where I am now. 8 months later, I'm settled in my new place. Work is good. I'm seeing someone new slowly, who genuinely asks my opinion and discusses things before acting. A refreshing change. Vanessa is mostly not on my mind. Occasionally something triggers a memory, but it doesn't hurt anymore. People asked whether I regretted how I handled it or whether I'd gone too far. I answered honestly, no. She revealed who she was by her actions, and I responded accordingly. Some called my choice harsh, but I asked whether they would accept their partner's ex moving in unannounced. Most wouldn't. It's easy to judge from outside, but they weren't the one told their girlfriend's ex was moving in that night and expected to accept it. I chose myself, my peace, and my boundaries. My brother said I'd dodged a bullet. If she behaved like that now, imagine what would happen later with shared finances or kids. He was right. The ring I once planned to give her sits in my drawer. I don't know whether to sell it or keep it. Maybe it'll remain as a reminder of what I won't accept and what partnership should look like. I'm not bitter. I'm clear about what I want and deserve. Someone who respects me enough to discuss major decisions, who treats us as partners, choosing each other every day, rather than one person deciding for both. If I never find that, I'm perfectly fine alone. Better than being with someone who disrespects me or makes unilateral decisions, and then smooths things over with apologies. I learned a lesson and won't need to learn it again. Life is quieter, simpler, and mine. No unexpected ex-boyfriends, no surprises, just me figuring out what comes next and making choices that are mine. That was worth a $4,000 lease break and the whole upheaval. More than that, I kept my self-respect, my boundaries, and my peace. Vanessa tried to push past them. I said no, and that made all the difference. Masha.